Hi, my name's Odalis, and last week, at my own mother's dinner table, they called me a betrayer, not because I lied, not because I stole, but because I wouldn't buy my sister a brand new Lexus for her wedding. They looked me in the eye and said I was tearing the family apart. Funny, because I'm the one who paid for the roof over their heads. And they knew, but they erased me anyway. From the guest list, from the wedding, from the family photos, until I reminded them who really owned the house they were decorating with flowers. You ever been forgotten on purpose? By the people you built everything for? Stick around, because the napkin they used to wipe their hands with was the one I folded with love. Before we dive in, let us know, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop a comment. This one's personal. I'd spent the better part of the morning folding napkins. Not just folding, shaping. I always liked doing something with my hands when the day felt emotionally charged, and tonight's dinner had a smell about it. Not burnt food. No, Ramona never burned anything. It was the thick, unspoken tension you could almost taste in a southern house that tried too hard to act like it wasn't falling apart. I arranged the pale linen napkins in a swirl that tucked like a rose, soft blush on white porcelain plates, just like they showed on those Southern Living spreads, but I didn't expect anyone to notice. And I was right. By 6:45 p.m., the dining room was full. Zinnia sat directly across from me, surrounded by glowing congratulations and the sound of glass tapping glass. Her diamond ring caught every flicker of chandelier light, on purpose, I suspected. Her laughter was high and practiced, and Ramona, our mother, beamed like she'd birthed a Kennedy. There I was, across the table, same bloodline, same room, but a completely different orbit. I smiled when necessary, nodded when prompted, and quietly passed the casserole dish without being thanked. I watched them all carefully, not bitter, just observant. You learn a lot that way. Dinner rolled on like a well-rehearsed scene until Zinnia placed her wine glass down with a tap. "So," she said sweetly, "we're thinking a December wedding, something small, classy, and quick." She looked straight at me. 3 months from now. There were oohs and how lovelies and even a low whistle from Sterling, her fiancé, who had no clue the storm brewing behind her eyes. Ramona didn't miss a beat. She dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin, one of mine, I noticed, crumpled like a fast food tissue, and turned to me with a look as casual as her tone wasn't. "You know what would be lovely," she said, "if you gifted her a car for the big day? A Lexus, maybe. You know, something dependable, like you always are." The room fell into a sudden silence, like someone had accidentally turned down the volume. Zinnia blinked twice, her smile turning to feigned humility. "Oh, I mean, only if you wanted to, Odie. But everyone keeps saying how you're always so thoughtful." I blinked once, twice, like maybe I misheard. But no one laughed. No one said, "Just kidding." No one pulled me aside and whispered, "Don't worry, it's ridiculous, I've got your back." They just stared. My hand remained wrapped around my water glass, knuckles tightening. "I didn't know that was something being discussed," I said calmly. I hadn't planned for that. Lowell, my father, gave a deep exhale. That slow, disappointed father breath he reserved for things like car dents and report cards. Ramona touched her chest like I'd shot her with a dart. "You mean, you're saying no?" "I'm saying I need to think. That's a lot to consider." Zinnia's lower lip trembled. Sterling looked down at his plate like the green beans had become uncomfortable. "I always knew you looked down on me," Zinnia whispered, loud enough for the room to hear. "You act like you're above all this. Above me." "No one said anything like that," I replied, still calm, but my appetite had vanished. Ramona leaned in, all wounded elegance. "You've always had trouble giving, Odalis. Ever since you were a little girl. You hoard your kindness like it's something to be rationed." Lowell, ever the final voice, spoke without looking at me. "After all we've done for you." There it was, the family gavel. I took a sip of water and tried not to let it shake in my hand. There was no yelling, no storming off, just silence thick as syrup while forks clinked and eyes avoided mine. No one asked me how work was. No one asked what I'd brought for dessert, though I'd baked the pie on the sideboard myself. No one used the folded napkins. Except for one, crumpled now, lying on Ramona's lap like she was oblivious to how she'd dismissed the time it took to make it. I didn't expect thanks. I'd long ago stopped hoping for it, but I didn't expect crucifixion for setting a boundary either. After dinner, chairs scraped across the wood floor. Sterling helped Ramona clear plates while Lowell lit a cigar on the porch. Zinnia swiped her phone, probably posting a filtered version of the evening where the tension didn't show. I moved toward the kitchen, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. That's when Ramona passed close behind me and, without even a glance, whispered near my shoulder, "It's not too late to do the right thing." Her tone wasn't pleading, it was warning. I opened the drawer near the sink, searching for a tea towel to wrap up my pie dish. That's when I saw it. One of my napkins, unfolded, stained with sauce, tossed there like garbage. I didn't say a word, but something settled in my chest, not rage, just memory, and a spark. She looked me in the eye and said, "This family wouldn't be standing without me." That's when I knew I had to remember what I'd paid for. I left the napkin in the drawer and didn't touch another thing that night. I drove home in silence. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't trust myself not to scream. By morning, my phone was already lit up like a Christmas tree. Notifications from people I hadn't heard from since high school, old coworkers, even one of my dad's cousins who lived in Florida. Some were vague, others less so. One message simply read, "Hey, you okay?" Then came a text from Amina, a friend from college who knew both me and Zinnia. She just sent a screenshot, no explanation. It was a post from Zinnia's Instagram story, a picture of her wiping away a single tear, perfectly lit, captioned in that casual martyrdom tone she'd perfected. "When your own sister thinks your happiness is too expensive..." She didn't name me. Of course she didn't. That would have been too direct. But the comments said enough. Families should support each other. Some people let money go to their heads. Always knew you were the kind one. I felt heat rise in my chest, not the kind that makes you want to punch a wall. No. This was quieter, slower, like someone had slipped a stone into my throat and I couldn't get it out. I set my phone down, then picked it up again. A second message from Amina followed. Another screenshot. This one was from a Facebook group my mother ran for our extended family. Someone, Zinnia clearly, had posted a cropped photo from our private group chat. Just one line of my text from the night before, clipped perfectly out of its thread. That's not something I'm comfortable doing. No mention of the full context. No mention of Ramona's setup at the dinner table. No mention of me being ambushed. Just those 10 words, plain, chilling. The comments under the photo were worse. She could have just said yes. It's a car, not a kidney. Wow. Cold. That's what happens when you forget where you came from. I stared at it for a long time, not moving, just watching my name, my intentions, my quiet life being twisted into a meme for people who didn't even like me to begin with. Around noon, a colleague texted asking if I was the sister from that viral post. She didn't mean harm, I think, but I logged out of every app after that. For the rest of the day, I didn't cook, didn't clean, didn't answer the phone. Instead, I sat on my back porch with a chipped mug of black tea and stared at my car, my own car, parked in the driveway. A 10-year-old Toyota Camry I'd bought used during the year I worked nights at the diner and weekends running invoices for a dental lab. Every scratch on its door had a story. It wasn't fancy. It was mine. I remembered what it felt like, that first time I slid into the front seat and turned the key. I didn't cry then, but I almost did now. "They don't know what I've given," I whispered, "but they sure remember how to ask." I stayed on that porch till the sun dropped low behind the trees. The air shifted. Somewhere in the neighborhood, sprinklers clicked on and the smell of wet grass floated up. By the time I went back inside, it was past 7. I changed into a t-shirt, reheated leftover soup, and tried to let my mind go blank. But it didn't. At exactly 9:41 p.m., my phone buzzed with a new message. No contact name, just a photo. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. Zinnia standing in front of my house, my second property, the one I bought in the outskirts of Smyrna, and quietly offered to the family to use as needed after Daddy's stroke. She stood there in a white jumpsuit, smiling with her hand over her belly like a maternity chute. The caption read, "Venue locked. Can't wait to walk down this driveway." I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the edges of my vision blurred. That was my house, my name on the deed, paid off with years of bonuses, sacrificed vacations, and 1,000 skipped lattes. I stared at the picture for 10 whole minutes. Then I remembered. I never told them I paid for that house. It was one of those March Fridays where the wind still felt like winter, even though spring was already on the calendar. I had left work early, papers still warm from the printer, when my mother called me, crying. "It's Zinnia," she'd said between sniffles. "She's going through a hard patch. She and Sterling. They need a place, something stable." There was no direct ask, just the heaviness of expectation sitting in every pause. A week later, I wired $40,000 to cover the down payment for a 2-bedroom ranch on Maple Trace Lane. I signed everything myself. Ramona hugged me once in the driveway, said, "You've always been the practical one." Then she turned and shouted to Zinnia, who was taking selfies with Sterling on the porch. No party, no announcement, not even a welcome mat with my name. Just silence. But now? Now she was using it for her wedding venue, and tagging it as if it were hers. By mid-morning, I had showered, dressed, and pulled into the neighborhood with my car windows cracked halfway. I didn't get out immediately. I watched from across the street, behind a row of dogwood trees. Caterers were already unloading silver trays. Someone was stringing up white lights around the porch railing. In the yard, a rented canopy had been erected, and a white banner fluttered gently in the breeze. Zinnia and Sterling, 1109. I didn't see anyone I recognized, which was for the best. But when I finally stepped out of the car, a young man in a headset glanced up and smiled at me. "You the planner?" he asked, holding a clipboard. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "The wedding planner?" he repeated, glancing back toward the house. I didn't answer. My mouth opened, closed. I turned and walked away before I said something that would set the grass on fire. I didn't drive home right away. I went to the library first, the one near Smyrna Square with the crooked parking lines. I sat in the back corner by the local history section, took out my phone and pulled up the email thread from 2 years ago. Found it. March 18th. Subject line, "Purchase confirmation, 2748 Maple Trace." The PDF was still there, signed, sealed, transferred. Later that night, I opened the file cabinet in my study, second drawer down. I hadn't touched it in months. I flipped past bank statements and tax folders, then stopped when I saw the manila envelope. Inside was the original deed, stamped and notarized. My name, my wiring confirmation. A sticky note attached by the notary still clung to the edge, faded but clear. Confirmed wire transfer complete, no co-signers. No one else had signed it, just me. I sat back on the carpet and stared at the ceiling. It hadn't been enough to exclude me from the wedding. They were erasing me from the history of the home itself. A flash of memory hit me, Zinnia's voice at my college graduation party. "She's just good on paper." At the time, everyone laughed. I laughed too. Now they were taking the paper too. The lights in the hallway buzzed as I stood, brushed off my hands, and walked to my desk. I scanned the deed, named the file, backup, for when they lie. I stared at the title for a long time, then added it to a private folder I'd never made before. That folder became something else entirely. Not a revenge plan, not even insurance. It was the first brick of a quiet wall I'd never let them cross again. Later after dinner, I sat on the couch with my legs tucked under me. The TV was on mute, some baking competition flashing in the background. I scrolled through old emails and thought about calling my cousin Darla, a real estate agent in Atlanta. I didn't call. Instead, I pulled up the number listed on the wedding banner's vendor site. A woman answered, cheerful, clearly distracted. Hi, this is Mayfield Events. How can I help? I kept my voice steady. Hi, I need to speak with the person coordinating the event on Maple Trace Lane. Sure, who's calling? I hesitated. My pulse jumped, but my voice didn't flinch. The owner of the property. There was a pause, not silence, just a soft, stretched beat on the other end. Then she asked, "Do you have legal proof?" I looked at the folder on my desktop, then stood. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The woman on the phone paused, and then asked if I had legal proof. I told her I'd be there in 20 minutes. The drive back to the house I paid for felt longer than it should have, even with every light green. My fingers drummed the steering wheel. I didn't play music. I needed silence, room to rehearse every word I might say. When I pulled into the driveway, the planner was already waiting by the front porch. She was petite, maybe in her 30s, with an iPad clutched tight against her chest. I parked, stepped out calmly, and handed her the printed deed, crisp in a clear folder. My name sat plainly across the top. Sole owner. Her lips parted as she scanned it. Then she looked up at me, brows lifting with slow realization. "We were told this was gifted months ago," she whispered, almost apologetically. I didn't answer that. I just looked past her, at the house with fairy lights already twinkling along the gutter. "I'd like to walk through," I said. "I want to see what I'm paying for." She stepped aside. The living room had been rearranged. Zinnia's style. Lots of blush tones, mason jars, fake greenery. A stack of invitation cards sat on the kitchen island, tied in dusty rose ribbon. I wasn't going to touch them, but curiosity has a pull. I untied the ribbon and opened the top card. The first thing I noticed? My name wasn't there, not even in the fine print, but everyone else was, even distant cousins who hadn't sent Christmas cards in a decade. I flipped one over, maybe hoping I'd see a handwritten note that explained it was just a mistake. Instead, I found a scribbled RSVP, "So glad she won't be there this time." I swallowed hard, then set the card down. The guest room still had the same creaky floorboard near the closet. I stepped over it like muscle memory and sat on the edge of the bed. I hadn't stayed in that room since before they moved in. A voice came back to me, my father's, the day I wired the money. "We'll make sure she knows who made this possible." Right. Not a mention since. Just holidays I was never invited to, photos I wasn't tagged in, and now a wedding hosted on land I paid for, where my name had been erased completely. My phone buzzed. "Ramona," I didn't pick up. I left the room, drifted down the hall toward the junk drawer by the back staircase, the one everyone stuffed with spare keys, dried pens, forgotten coupons. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, maybe proof they had lied about something else. Instead, under a stack of old catalogs and paper clips, I found a small red leather notebook. The kind my dad used to keep mileage logs in when he drove long haul back in the 90s. I flipped it open. Receipts, scribbled IOUs, notes on who paid for what over the years. And then, there it was. March 4th. OW, wired $40K for down payment, says she doesn't want credit. OW, that was me. O'Dallas Woodall. I read that line 3 times. So they knew. They always knew. They didn't forget me. They just decided silence was easier, more convenient, better for the narrative that made Zinnia look cherished and me disposable. I whispered, "You knew. You all knew." But there were no tears left for that. No ache in my chest. Just a quiet rearranging of intent. I took the red book and slid it into my folder, the one I'd started building. Back in my car, I opened my email app, attached the deed and a PDF scan of the notebook page, and typed a short message. To planner contact. Subject, event continuation, Maple Trace property. You may continue with the event, but there will be a lease agreement, rent due by Friday. I hit send. I didn't feel triumphant, but I didn't feel erased either. Not anymore. The planner didn't respond right away, but when she did, it was just one line. "They're going to freak out." I didn't reply. I powered off my phone, set it face down on the kitchen counter, and just stood there, hands gripping the edge of the sink. A breeze drifted in through the half-open window, carrying the scent of cut grass and roses from the neighbor's yard. It was strangely peaceful for a moment when everything else felt like it was cracking apart inside me. I didn't reach out to anyone that day, not even to friends. I made my tea, washed the dishes, folded a bit of laundry, but under all of it was this strange thrum of guilt, quiet, persistent. Was I really the one tearing everything apart? A text pinged that evening from Melody, an old friend from college who still kept up with family gossip through social media more than direct connection. Maybe just let them have it? For peace? For peace. I stared at those 4 words until the screen dimmed on its own. I knew she meant well, but it scraped something deep. Since when did peace mean being erased? Or more accurately, letting them erase you? The next morning, I woke up to an email from an unknown address. It had no subject line, just one attachment, a voice memo file. I hesitated before playing it, but when I finally did, Sterling's voice came through. Soft, uneasy. "Hi, O'Dallas. I don't know if this will make a difference, or if you even want to hear from me. But I just wanted you to know I'm aware. About the house. Zinnia told me shortly after we got engaged. She said you insisted on keeping it quiet, that you didn't want credit, but she also swore me to secrecy. I didn't agree, but I didn't say anything. That's on me. I'm sorry." He paused near the end, like he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Then it cut out. I stared at the screen for a long time after it ended. My thumb hovered over the delete button. Then I changed my mind and tapped save. I dropped the file into the folder alongside the deed and the debt book. They were all pieces now. Proof. Weight. Memory. The following Sunday, I made a quiet plan to visit a new women's group at a church across town. It had been a while since I walked into a sanctuary. I guess I just needed something still and quiet, where no one expected anything from me but my presence. But when I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed something familiar. Too familiar. 3 cars I recognized: my father's truck, Ramona's SUV, and Zinnia's sedan, parked in front of the adjacent event hall. I blinked, then remembered. This was the day of the pre-wedding brunch. Somehow I had marked it wrong in my calendar. Of all places to show up by accident. Before I could reverse out, someone tapped my window. It was my niece, 8 years old. Freckles, hair tied with pink ribbons. She grinned. "Aunt O," she chirped. I got out, crouched down to her level, smiled. "Hey, sweetheart." She leaned in, innocent as ever, and said, "Mommy says you only care about money. That's why nobody wants you at the wedding." I paused, not in shock, just in realization. It was confirmation of what I already knew. Children don't invent cruelty. They repeat what they hear. I met her eyes, calm and even. "Tell Mommy I'll stop caring about money the day they stop using mine." She tilted her head, confused. I kissed her on the forehead and gently nudged her back toward the crowd. I didn't go inside. I drove off without looking back. That afternoon, I pulled into the park near my place. Not the one with picnic tables or tennis courts. The quiet one, mostly empty, with a few benches and one old oak in the center that looked like it had lived through more storms than people. I parked under its shadow, opened my folder, and laid the documents across the passenger seat. Deed, notary note, red leather debt log, voice memo printout. I stared at them all. Maybe I am punishing them, I whispered to no one. Maybe that's all this is. I sat there as the sun slipped lower behind the trees, casting gold across the grass. At home that evening, I opened my laptop. The words came easily. Too easily, maybe. Subject line: I'll step back. Body: I don't want to ruin your special day. I'll withdraw the lease terms. You may host the wedding without further obligation. Please consider this my gift. I hovered over the send button. Then something stopped me. I minimized the email and opened the screenshot again, the one from the invitation list where my name was missing. Then I scrolled up through old memories. There it was, buried among years of digital clutter, A message from Zinnia, sent years ago, the night I earned my master's degree. "You're lucky you're the quiet one," she'd written. "You're easy to forget." I clicked out of the email draft, deleted it, then opened a new one. To attorney's name. Subject, formal withdrawal of access. I attached the lease draft. I added the documentation, and I hit send. And then I did something I never thought I would. I drove back to the house, parked in the driveway, and knocked on my own front door. The knock didn't echo long. Within seconds, the door creaked open, and there she was. Ramona, still in her pearls, robe tied too tight like she was afraid anything might slip out. Emotion, truth, control. Her eyes locked with mine, widening in that familiar blend of surprise and contempt she never bothered to mask. But before she could form words, I heard the shuffling behind her. Zinnia stepped into view, wrapped in ivory satin like she was already in rehearsal. She didn't say a word, just gave me a smirk, one that didn't reach her eyes. "Morning," I said, voice level. "This house is no longer available for your event. You're trespassing." The robe's sheen didn't hide the way Zinnia stiffened. Ramona blinked, slow, then faster, like she was processing a language she hadn't heard since decency left her vocabulary. Sterling appeared in the hallway just in time. He stopped mid-step like he'd run into a glass door. He didn't say anything either, but his face turned the color of regret. I reached into my bag and held out a sealed envelope, offered it to Zinnia like a party invitation. "What's this?" she asked. "Legal notice," I answered. "Cease and desist. Unauthorized use of private property. Also a reminder that your insurance doesn't cover you here." Zinnia laughed. It was hollow and high-pitched, like a child trying to sound brave. "You're kidding." "No," I said. "I've been quiet. Doesn't mean I'm dumb." Ramona stepped forward then, voice cracking into a shrill pitch. "You're destroying your sister's happiness." I looked her in the eye, for once not flinching, not flailing. "I built it," I said, calm and cool. "I'm just reclaiming my foundation." They didn't move, just stood there, stunned in their own foyer, like strangers surprised to see the landlord. I turned, ready to leave, but something caught my eye as I passed the hallway. The photo wall. It used to be filled with all of us, years of holidays, birthdays, graduations, and I was always in the corner, a smile too soft to notice. Now, every frame remained, polished and centered, but not one showed me. I paused, walked toward the side table where the mail always piled up, opened the drawer. There it was, my photo, the only one where I was in her bridal party back when I thought she'd be happy for me someday. Dust-coated, glass cracked, tucked beneath pizza flyers and expired coupons. I took it out, brushed it gently with my sleeve, looked at it for just a moment, then placed it face down on the kitchen counter. Not in rage, just in acknowledgement. It wasn't the missing photo that broke something in me. It was that no one noticed it was gone. Later that day, after a quiet drive home and a stop at the bakery for coffee I didn't drink, I sat down across from my attorney. We went over the lease clause, the enforceability of last-minute event cancellations, and how far I wanted to go with penalties. I asked her what would happen if they tried to smear me again online. She gave me a look. "Already happening," she said. "You haven't seen it?" "No," I muttered. "I logged off everything." She turned her iPad toward me. On the screen was Zinnia's TikTok, live no less. There she was, with her eyes slightly red, speaking softly, dramatically. "I just hope I'm strong enough to survive what my own sister is doing to me," she said. "I never asked for anything except to be loved." A cascade of hearts floated up the screen. Comments flooded in. "She's just jealous." "Family can be the worst." "You deserve better." I exhaled through my nose, shut the tablet, and tried not to let my hands shake. Then my laptop pinged. It was an email from a local freelance journalist who covered community stories of injustice. The subject line read, "Would you like to go on record?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened my file folder, dragged the photo of the deed, the notary note, the debt log, and Sterling's voice memo into a new folder titled Truth, in case I forget. Sometimes you don't speak to defend yourself, you speak to end the story. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened my file folder because sometimes you don't speak to defend yourself. You speak to end the story. There was a strange kind of stillness in the room as I reread the documents I'd been saving, quietly, methodically, without anyone knowing. The deed, the voice memo from Sterling, the group chat screenshot, untouched and uncropped. I opened a blank email and attached all three. The journalist's name was Melissa Klein. She worked freelance, mostly covering human interest pieces. I wasn't sure if this would interest her. After all, there were no bruises, no police reports, no screaming matches in the driveway. Just silence. Years of it. In the body of the email, I wrote exactly 6 sentences. This is not a story about revenge. It's about remembering. I didn't ask to be part of the narrative they spun. I just stopped letting them edit mine. Attached are verified documents. There is no war here, just memory. I hit send. Then I stood up, closed the laptop, and went to pour myself a glass of water. Not because I was thirsty, but because doing something so ordinary reminded me that I was still standing. The next morning, my neighborhood's HOA posted a new bulletin online. Tucked between gardening reminders and announcements for the upcoming block party, it read, "Any use of residential property for commercial events must be approved in advance. Misrepresentation of ownership or unauthorized events may result in revocation of HOA privileges." No names. But names weren't needed. Ramona had spent the past 6 weeks flaunting her daughter's wedding venue to anyone with a Facebook login. And now, whispers began. I could feel them from my porch. A neighbor waving a little too stiffly. An invitation to brunch that never followed through. RSVPs quietly withdrawn. I didn't feel vindicated, just confirmed. 2 days later, a friend texted me a link to a local gossip page. It was called Peachy Secrets, the kind that thrived off who got a DUI, who was cheating, who skipped HOA dues. A new post had gone up. Title, The Erased Sister. There was a Dropbox folder attached. Inside it, the unedited group chat. A scan of the debt log from Ramona's drawer. A high-resolution photo of the wedding invitation with my name glaringly absent. And a single line, handwritten on the inside flap of the folder. She never said no to us. She just stopped saying yes. It spread like wildfire. Suddenly, sympathy flipped. The same people who'd clutched their pearls at Zinnia's TikToks now shared the post with hashtags like Truth Matters and Silent Strength. A few even tagged me. I didn't respond, not publicly, not even to the messages pouring in from people who used to pretend I was invisible at church potlucks. Sterling went silent online. Zinnia lost a local boutique sponsorship she'd just announced the week prior. And the wedding? Postponed, according to her latest story. Ramona tried to call me 3 times in one afternoon. I let each ring out. Later that evening, I walked to the fireplace with something heavy in my hands. It was a second photo frame, one I hadn't seen in years. It held a picture of Zinnia and me as children, matching Easter dresses, sticky fingers from jelly beans, and my arm looped protectively around her shoulder. I remembered that day. She'd scraped her knee, and I'd carried her across gravel because she refused to walk. I held it a long time. Then I set it gently in the fireplace and lit a match. It burned slow, glass cracking, paper curling, edges darkening like memory itself was exhaling. Some ties don't break. They rot. And I was done breathing the air around them. The next afternoon, a knock came at my door. I didn't recognize the delivery driver, just the manila envelope in his hand. No return address, no explanation. Inside, I found my RSVP envelope, the one that had never been sent to me in the first place, and tucked inside, a torn version of the wedding invitation. My name had been scribbled in, hastily, in black ink. Uneven lettering, no flourish, and behind it, a check. $40,000, unsigned. no note, just paper that tried to erase everything it had once begged for. I folded the check once, placed it under my coffee mug, and thought, this is what guilt without accountability looks like. The paper sat there all morning, untouched, as I went about my routine. Coffee, a quick rinse of laundry, a glance out the kitchen window. Georgia light crept through the blinds, making the check glow like something it wasn't, a peace offering. Around noon, I heard the rustle of another envelope dropping through the mail slot. This one had my father's handwriting on it, shaky, rigid letters on the front, as if he hadn't written my name in a while and had to remember how it curved. Inside was a folded piece of yellowed stationery, the kind he used when he still cared about letters. He dated it the night before. "Oh, Dallas, you paid for that house. You paid for more than any of us ever admitted. I've rewritten the will. It's yours again, the house and everything tied to it. We did what we had to. Dad." That was it. No, I'm sorry. Just logistics dressed as repentance. As if paperwork could wipe away the erasure, the gossip, the years of being the scapegoat. Still, I read it twice. Underneath the letter were legal documents. Clean, notarized, stamped. The property now placed in trust, fully titled to me. The timing wasn't lost on me either. The documents were signed just 24 hours before the wedding rehearsal. I pressed my lips together and whispered out loud, "So this is your idea of making it right. Just in time to protect your daughter's Instagram venue." I called my lawyer. "Withdrawal of access. Enforceable immediately," I said flatly. "You want to go through with it this time?" he asked. "Yes, no more silence, no more loopholes." That evening, I dressed in navy. Not black. This wasn't mourning. And not a dress. This wasn't submission. I parked just outside the neighborhood gates, not wanting my car to be the announcement. Then I walked, head high, spine straight, down the sidewalk and into the whirlwind of satin, florals, and curated chaos. Vendors buzzed. String lights were halfway up. A champagne cart stood at the edge of the lawn, glinting in the fading light. I saw her before she saw me, Zinnia, in a silk robe the color of blush wine, phone in hand, giving directions to a florist. When she turned and saw me, her face froze. "You're not welcome here," she hissed, storming over. "You can't just walk in." I handed the wedding planner a laminated notice I'd prepared earlier. Private property, unauthorized event canceled. Owner, Odalis W. She blinked at it, read it again, then looked at me. I said nothing. Security was called. They read the sign, the documents. One of them raised an eyebrow and muttered, "Ma'am, we'll need you to step back." To Zinnia. Ramona burst from the side patio like she'd been shot out of a cannon. "You are ruining her big day," she screeched, cheeks flushed red. I didn't flinch. "She ruined every one of mine," I replied quietly. No one clapped, no gasps, but the air shifted. Sterling came out of the house just in time to see his bride being escorted off the lawn. He didn't say a word, just lowered his head and walked in the opposite direction. Back at home that night, I didn't check social media, didn't need to. I knew it would catch fire. Instead, I drove to Aunt Marina's. She opened the door, no questions asked, and poured me a glass of wine. We sat in her kitchen, folding napkins into tiny leaf shapes like we used to when I was a girl. Jazz played low from the corner radio. She hummed along and said only one thing that stuck. "You finally stopped feeding the beast." I smiled. For once, not out of politeness. Later, curled up on her couch with a blanket over my knees, I heard the faint chime of my phone. A new voice memo, time-stamped 2:13 a.m. Zinnia's voice cracked as she whispered, "I didn't think you'd actually walk away." I sat there staring at the screen, and maybe she didn't. But I did, and I kept walking, all the way into a life I finally owned. That morning, I sat on the front porch with a cup of tea warming my palms, no music, no phone in hand, just the soft creak of the swing beneath me and the distant sound of birds waking up in the trees. The sky still held the golden haze of early light, the kind that feels like it forgives you for yesterday. The wedding never happened at the house. I didn't need confirmation. I felt it in the air, in the silence that followed. No cars lined the driveway, no music echoed down the block. Just quiet, restful, final. Rumors had already begun to ripple. I heard through the neighbor across the street. Zinnia and Sterling had postponed indefinitely. Some said it was over completely, others claimed it was just a private reset. But I didn't chase down details. No one from my family had contacted me. I sipped slowly, letting the jasmine tea settle something deeper than my breath. Then I heard soft steps on the walkway. Aunt Marina appeared, wearing one of her floral blouses and holding something in her hand. She didn't say a word. She simply placed a folded napkin next to my cup, shaped like a leaf. I stared at it for a long beat. The last time I folded napkins like that, no one used them. They'd been brushed aside, left wrinkled under soup bowls and greasy fingers. Now, this one sat untouched, clean, deliberate, folded by someone who saw me. The napkin hadn't changed, but I had. I reached over, smoothed its corner, and smiled at my aunt. No need to say anything. That afternoon, I finally opened the voice memo Zinnia left at 2:13 a.m. Her voice cracked halfway through. "I didn't think you'd actually walk away." I listened twice, then I drafted a single reply. "I walked away because staying cost me more than money." And that was the truth. I blocked the number afterward, not out of spite, but because healing has no space for echoes of manipulation. There was no anger left to spend. 2 weeks passed. The house felt different, not heavier, but rooted. I'd started minor renovations, a fresh coat of paint here, new cabinet knobs there. Nothing showy, just choices that were mine. I converted the guest room, Zinnia's old room, into a quiet study, replaced the pink drapes with warm linen ones, took down the childhood posters and hung shelves with worn books, a record player, and a photo of me with Aunt Marina at a lake in Asheville. I didn't keep any other family pictures, not out of malice, just peace. I began hosting Sunday dinners, simple ones, roast chicken, mashed sweet potatoes, and salad from the garden out back. My aunt came every week. Sometimes a neighbor or two joined. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't need to. One Sunday, after everyone had left and dishes were drying on the rack, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked into the foyer. There, near the front door, hung the deed. I'd framed it, not for pride, but as a quiet promise to myself, that I would never again forget my worth, that I had always been more than the helper, more than the quiet one. I had been the foundation. As evening slid into twilight, I stood at the window and watched a young couple touring the house across the street. The woman held her partner's hand, gesturing toward the porch as if imagining rocking chairs and laughter. Her smile was soft, hopeful. She looked up and saw me. I waved gently. She waved back. Then I looked down. My coffee mug still rested on the check, the one my parents had sent, unsigned, of course. I'd never moved it. I didn't need to. It served its purpose right there, every day. A little reminder that guilt without ownership is just another form of control. I would never cash it, and I would never return to who I'd been. I closed my eyes, letting the quiet settle deep in my chest. Then, just before heading to bed, I picked up the folded napkin one last time and placed it on my desk in the study. It didn't belong in the drawer anymore. It belonged in the room I built for myself. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of finally hearing yourself. They called me selfish. I call it survival. And no, I don't regret taking the house back, because I was never the thief. I was just the one they thought would never say no.